Hi, mini presentation today on pond ecosystems. Let's get started. This is a photo of a standard pond. This photo was taken about 11 years ago. I pulled it from social media. This is a place that I visit semi-regularly, and so I do have it photographed over time, which is inadvertent, but also fantastic for presentations like this. But this photo was taken 11 years ago. It was off season at some point. You can see that the environment around it is not completely green and it's not lush with summer colors. I don't know specifically when it was taken, and I do apologize for that. I could not pull it up on social mediums where I had it, just because uh, finding it in the context is/was harder than anticipated. So, but this is the standard pond. It's off season, no official date, and I do apologize. Could either be fall or it could be spring. You can see the fallen leaves on the ground and on this old dock. There's also a little island in the middle, and that's kind of interesting. It's got some grasses here, some green, but it is not in peak. So this standard pond is an ecosystem in and of itself. It does have a wildlife associated. Deer can drink from it. I've not seen them drink from it per se. There's a lake nearby that might have better tasting water. I'm not sure, but we'll go into that a little bit later in this presentation. But deer will walk past. This is a place where we get a lot of turtles. You might also find some ducks that will find a harbor here and kind of stay safe in this ecosystem. It is um, very variable in how it thrives and/slash or doesn't. This is a photo from 7 years ago, so 4 years after that first photo, or the previous photo anyway. It's actually the same time frame as that very first photo. Pond ecosystems, this is that same dock after 4 years of the decomposition process. You can see some moss growing on the edges here. There's a log on it, a few logs it looks like. Definitely decomposing, getting taken up by nature, becoming one with nature. But this is the same time frame as the 7 years ago. And you can see that there is much more bountiful wildlife on it. You've got the grasses, plants, all sorts of different mosses on uh, this decaying dock, and algae just all over the place in the pond. So looking at closer, or rather farther, at a more holistic view, this is what it looks like. And I did make note, watch for eutrophication. Obviously, it's very green in this photo. I think prior to the 11 years ago, it also had lily pads. So this might be kind of a perpetual cycle of greening, and then being less green, like in this photo. Just with variable plants that do thrive in this environment. But I did say watch for eutrophication, nitrogen in the water from the decay process, the decay of perhaps even that dock, but also the plants and any waste materials left by animal life, things like that. It can upset the chemistry, but nitrogen is beneficial to plants, and it does have some sunlight. there as well. So that can be highly beneficial for plant life, plant proliferation, and it can kind of start to grow abundantly, grow to excess, which we see in this photo, where there's that solid green across the surface that can block the sunlight from other plants lying below the surface. That can also affect fish, if there are any fish in this pond, as well as other wildlife. That may be thriving in this environment. It cuts off the sun to the lower plants, uses an abundant amount of that nitrogen and other nutrients that promote life. And so the eutrophication is the process of overabundance, 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 and then a die off, a period where things will not grow. And this is um, a photo from 2026, the weekend of May 31st, giving this presentation just not even a month after. So this is the current state of it, arguably. Of course, we are getting into the summer months, so hopefully it's greened up more by this time. That island in the center will no doubt have more plants in the soil. But the water does appear very black. You can kind of see it's foggy along the surface. This was a very busy pollen season as well. We had a lot of pollen kind of floating through the air, and so that might contribute to that fog a little bit. But I have a closer up photo in the next slide here that we can take a look at. But this water appears very black, and there is some time. This photo was taken 7 years ago, and this is current, and so 7 years is quite an amount of time. I know that I have been previously, I couldn't find any other photos that were easily accessible for this project, but you can see that the water is pretty black. It got very little in way of that algae. They actually did replace the dock there, so it's looking like it maybe did experience that eutrophication at some point in the last 7 years. Noting this photo, the ice out, meaning the winter thaw, was later in the year, and the other bodies of water nearby, I mentioned there was a lake nearby, have low water levels at this time, and so that may also be influencing the amount of green in this water. And of course, this is May, and so you can even tell in the environment, there's grasses and the trees are abundant with the green, but there is still a bit of accumulation from the fall and a lot of brown still obvious on the ground. We've not had the full effects of summer come in yet, and I don't know how that will look, and I would love to take more photos. I don't know if I will get back, or how soon I will get back to take more photos, but this is, there is variability and arguability in way of the status of the water, where it's at, and the actual viability for greening in life. This is just a very mini presentation, so it's just kind of a jumping off point, an interesting project idea, or just something that's meant to provoke thought and potential for more research. So just something small, but this is a little bit closer. You can see the water here. There is quite a bit on the top. There's a layer of something here. It is a pond, and so it is standing water. No drainage aside from what might seep into the earth below it. And then there is no aeration. There's no refreshing. There's not a spring that's feeding it underneath that we're aware of. Um, and so, no aeration. We don't have one of those air filtration bubbler systems you can find in other lakes if they're trying to promote a healthy ecosystem. They might have that for fish and for birds, like to kind of promote uh, interest and more oxygen in exchange, things like that. They might have aerators that they bring in. Um, but this is a body of water, and it is fairly stagnant. It doesn't have those other agitators aside from wildlife. So it does have that coating on top that looks like scuzz. It might be misc greases. And again, there actually is another photo later on with a little more of that, but just accumulating on the top of the water. And some of that might be pollen because, like I mentioned, at this time we were going through a very pollen season. That wasn't grammar, but I think that that's still an okay thing to say. Here is, oh, I won't skip ahead. But there is another photo of it. But ponds do naturally fill in with detritus. That is kind of the natural progression over time. I did read that in a textbook about ecosystems a few years back. It said that is kind of what happens, and that's with Minnesota. That's a big deal because we are the land of 10,000 lakes. And I actually went to college in Wisconsin for a few years, and they were joking, 10,000 lakes, sure, they're ponds at most. 10,000, sure. They're just poking fun because I mean, they have a very comparable landscape, comparable ecosystems. They have lakes as well, and so they were just giving Minnesota a little bit of grief. Like, I think there was something a little more derogatory that they called Minnesota with our 10,000 lakes. But that is, that's our motto. We're proud of them, and that is something that we can talk about another time. But sorry, Wisconsin. but but in the textbook, it did indicate that ponds are smaller, and if they don't have like a feeding source, if they don't have rivers flowing into them, if they don't have um, a spring underneath, they will eventually fill in. They, like, even now, looking at this photo here, you see we've got the leaves and we've got other misc detritus, on this shoreline here. Kind of filling in, plus other factors that go into the filling in of ponds as a natural progression. There's water evaporation from the sun, and that water may not always be replaced with local storms if the water evaporates and then the atmosphere, has the wind that blows it out of that area. That water may not be replaced, especially if we're going through a drought, if it's not the rainy season, if we don't have a particularly rainy, spring or summer, it might not get that replenishment of that water. And so that is a factor. And then this pond has been consistent, though it has perhaps slightly been reduced in size for the last 25 years. I actually have been around for that time. I mentioned I've visited this pond regularly. I remember getting lost in the woods by this pond more than 25 years ago. And I was a child, obviously, and I was so scared because I was lost in the woods. And I remember running by, which is why I recalled the potential lily pads. I seem to recall that it was very green back then with a lot of lily pads, which is really cool, actually. And I think it was bigger at that time, but so slight slight reduction in size. It's hard. I didn't do any official measurements of it, of course, and that's something that could be done because it is a cute little pond. Um, but you can see here it does have that detritus, those leaves kind of building up a layer, and as those decompose, that'll become a sort of soil, and then um, I don't know what time scale they're looking at that ponds generally do fill in, but it is argued that that is the case. Environmental conservation efforts may try to prolong the life cycle of a given pond, so as to maintain those ecosystems. We don't have glaciers anymore that kind of dig out the land and create ponds. A lot of ponds nowadays are more man-made, and I don't know if this one was man-made. It was, I couldn't argue that. It's that's beyond my knowledge base here, but but we don't have those glaciers. We don't have that same that the same. It's not, the environment is not the same as it was, and a lot of human efforts make sure that we maintain safety in the landscape as it is, and that can be seen kind of with rivers and river flow. Naturally, they are meant to kind of change their paths over time, and the banks are prone to changing, and a lot of effort goes in to ensure that that bank stays in place versus moving as is the natural course over time, specifically to maintain human constructs, human civilization, and bridges that we've put in place, and things like that. So a lot of it does kind of factor in and try to control nature and keep it from changing as is the natural course of things. So in this circumstance, trying to promote the life cycle of this and keep it around, you might muck out some of the detritus, and but of course, especially, I mean, it seems like that would be a natural step, especially after eutrophication, where everything kind of dies off anyway. Just everything's dead anyway. But I mean, certain levels of I guess I should iterate. I don't have a doctorate in environmental conservation. Do not listen to me and just willy-nilly saying after eutrophication might be primo. I am not actually an expert at those, but I mean, trying to get some of that detritus out would probably be one of those steps that you could take to promote longevity. You can also plant moisture-loving trees at the perimeter. I actually was part of a conversation in conservation where they were discussing specific trees for that purpose. For planting, tamaracks are good by moisture, but they don't really have the same canopy, the same shade that is cast. But then you'll want to find shade lovers, and that's where you might plant more maples if you want to close a canopy, things like that. So all of those kind of go into that conversation of how best to shade that body of water to keep that evaporation from happening, or at least reduce the rates of the evaporation, while promoting that healthy ecosystem. But of course, having more shade might affect and impact the plants that are in that water, because those might need more sun, direct sun, i.e., looking at the lily pads that are no more, and things like that. What has shifted? What has changed? How shade would play into that? I've never looked at shade in way of water plants before. I've just barely brushed the surface on what plants can build up the under the canopy and create that understory. Um, and just barely brushing the surface of that, but it's definitely a big area of study. Obviously, we want to keep our bodies of water, and Minnesota is very proud of our water here. So, just something to look at and think of. This is the photo. I wanted to jump ahead. This is actually a closer photo of the surface. You can just see just like clouds of, and I don't know if that is just the chemicals, the chemistry of decomposition, how much of it is the pollen. It was really bad this year. You can see catkins from a tree so those are plant seeds. A little bit of green under the water. To me, it seemed like it was very, it was actually concerning that we didn't have more green, but then we did just have ice out up there. It was a late ice out too, so that probably threw things off also. Um, so it's something that could be observed. And I'm not up there, and I don't know if I will get up there, but just something to kind of think about. Yeah, you can kind of see the scuzz layer of whatever is going on here, but all of that is a part of the ecosystem, like the larger ecosystem, and it's all a lot of that stuff is natural, and eutrophication does happen naturally. um, Natural imbalance does occur, and then to what extent, I don't know if we'll ever know with humans as they are engaging in the environment, but it is definitely a unique process, very unique, um, to think about. And so we'll wrap up the conversation. This is just a photo of some of the detritus that you can muck out and what might fill in and create soil in that pond. Uh, but are there any questions?